Okay, now let's look at the last section of week 25 materials, okay, which is the word problems that involve linear equations and straight lines. We've seen word problems before, right? When we were dealing with linear functions, linear equations, right? We let x be some kind of variable, and then we build a mathematical model based on the information given in the question. So for word problems that involve linear equations and graphs, it's very similar, okay? I think I've said this before. For word problems, the calculation is never the hardest part, okay? The hardest part is how to convert all the information given in the question to mathematical language. And how do we build a mathematical model using the given information? Okay, so let's take it slow. Let's look at this example and see if we can understand this. So linear relation can be used as a mathematical model for some practical problems. When linear functions are used to represent practical situations, the slopes and y-intercepts may have particular meanings. So let me highlight this part for you. Okay, what does this mean? When we deal with linear relations and graphs in pure math, which means if we don't give those, if we don't give any real meanings to the slope or intercepts, then slope merely measures how steep a straight line is. It doesn't have any real life meaning. The y-intercepts, they don't have any real life meaning. But in word problems, slope of a straight line and the y-intercepts, they all have real life meaning. Okay, so we'll see what that means in the example. Let's look at the example. The example says the Murray Lake restaurant has banquet facilities for 300 people. So this banquet facilities are enough for 300 people, maximum 300 people. Okay. When the manager quotes a price for the banquet, he's including the room rent plus the cost of the meal. So pay attention here, please. When the manager quotes a price for the banquet, he's including the room rent plus the cost of the meal, which means the total cost of the banquet has two components, right? The first component is the room rent. And the second component of the total cost is the cost of the meal. Cost of the meal. Okay. Here, let's look closer at these two costs, and then we'll realize that these two costs are actually of two different types. Room rent. If we have 10 guests for the banquet, the room rent will be, for example, $300. If we have 20 people, 20 guests, the room rent will still be $300. If we have 150 people, the room rent will still be $300. If we have maximum 300 people, the room rent is still $300. So the point here is room rent is a cost that does not change as the number of guests changes. Okay, I repeat this. Room rent is the type of cost that does not change as the number of guests changes. So for this kind of cost, we call it fixed cost. Fixed cost. Okay. So for fixed cost means it doesn't change, right? It doesn't matter how many people we invite to the banquet. The room rent does not change. On the other hand, cost of the meal. If If we have 20 guests, we only need to make 20 meals, which means we only need to pay for the cost of 20 meals. If we invite 50 people, then we need to make 50 meals. That means we need to pay for the cost of 50 meals. If we invite 200 people, then we need 200 meals. That means we need to pay for 200 meals. So the cost of a meal, on the other hand, changes as the number of guests changes. Okay, so for this type of cost, we call it variable cost because it varies. Okay, variable cost. So this total cost of this banquet, the total cost of the banquet consists of two components. Okay, first one is room rent, which is called the fixed cost. And the second component is cost of a meal, which is called variable cost. So let's continue looking at the question. A banquet for 50 people costs $800. So let's write the information down here. If we have 50 people, we will need to pay $800. 100 people will cost $1,250. 100 people will cost $1,250. Okay. 200 people will cost $2,150. 200 will cost $2,150. What does these pairs, number pairs, look like? They look like points, right? They look like points. So we can actually use these ordered pairs as points, and we can plot these points in the coordinates plane. So we can plot these points in the coordinates plane. Okay, I'm not going to do it here because I don't have the proper paper. I can't measure the stuff. But the answer here did that for us. Okay, so if we plot these 3 points in the coordinates plane, this will be 5,800. This point represents 112.50. And this point represents 200 and 21.50. If we join these 3 points, we'll see. Okay, so this point, technically it should be on the straight line. Like the graph is not perfectly made. Okay, that's why I said it's hard to draw a graph without proper you either use some kind of application software, or you need proper paper and ruler and stuff. Otherwise, it's really hard to draw the graph perfectly. So if you join these 3 points, you will notice that these 3 points actually lie on the same straight line. Okay, we have 3 points, and these 3 points are on the same straight line. We can determine that these 3 points represent a linear relation. So let's look at question part A. A says, determine the cost of a banquet for 150 people. Determine the cost of a banquet for 150 people. So what do we have now? What do we have in our hands now? We have 3 points. If we recall what we have learned, if we have 3 points, if we have 2 points, we can simply use the point slope form to find the expression of the straight line. Now we have 3 points. We have even more information than needed, we can use we can use any two of the 3 points to find the expression of the straight line, right? So for example, let me use the first two. Okay. It doesn't matter which 2 points you use, okay? The result of the expression of the straight line will be the same, okay? So how do we do that? We have 2 points now, right? We're gonna use 50, 800, and we're going to use 100, 12, 50. Okay. We have 2 points. How do we find the expression? We've done that multiple times, right? First step, we need to find the slope. Slope is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is equal to 1250 minus 800 over 100 minus 50. 1250 minus 800, that's 450, right? Over 100 minus 50, that's just 50. So the slope is equal to 9. Now we have the slope and we have 2 points, right? This is something that we're familiar with too, right? We can use the slope and either of these 2 points and use the point slope form to find the expression. So let me just use this point. Let me use this point. Okay. So we have m is equal to 9. Okay. This result is so we got this result from here, from this step, right? This is equal to y minus 800 over x minus 50. Okay. And now we simply multiply x minus 50 on both sides of the equation to get rid of the denominator, right? So we have 9x minus 50 is equal to y minus 800. Okay, so technically, if you leave your answer like this is already a correct answer because this form is called the point slope form. Point slope form. So if you leave your answer like this is the right answer, okay? However, I personally prefer the slope intercept form because for me, that's easier for me to do all the calculation. Let me remind you, what is slope intercept form? It looks like this, y is equal to mx plus b, where m is the slope and what b is the y-intercept. Okay, so I personally encourage you to, if you find the point slope form, try to convert this form to the slope intercept form, because when you do the calculation, when you take different x values, it'll be easier for you to find the y value. Okay, so how do we change this to this? Easy. We isolate y. So we put y on one side of the equation, then put everything else on the other side of the equation. So we have y is equal to, so we move this to this side, right? 9x minus 50 plus 800. Okay, and then we open the brackets because we need to isolate y, and we need to make sure that our answer is strictly of this form. Okay, so the slope has to be multiplied to the x. There can't be any brackets, so we need to open the brackets. So 9x minus 50 times 9, that's 450, right? Plus 800, and y is equal to 9x minus 450 plus 800. The answer is 350, positive 350. So this will be our expression for the total cost, right? So we got this expression based on all the information here. Okay. Let's recall what we did. So we are given that When we have 50 people, the cost is $800. When we have 100 people, the cost will be $1,250. When we have 200 people, the cost will be $2,150. And so we have 3 points. We have these 3 points, okay? If we plot these 3 points in the graph, we got a straight line, which means there is a linear relation that is represented by these 3 points. Okay, why is this step important? It is because if we have 3 points, then it's not necessary that these 3 points are on the same straight line. If these 3 points are not on the same straight line, then there's no linear relation in the first place. Okay, that's why plotting the points in the graph is important, because in this step, we're basically verifying whether these 3 points are on a straight line, which means whether these 3 points are in the same linear relation. Okay, so after we did this, we determine that there exists a straight line where these 3 points are on the same straight line. So that's first step. And now we need to find the expression of the straight line, right? We have 3 points. We have 50, 800, 100, 1250, and 200, 2150. We can pick any 2 of these 3 points and use what we learned in last class to find the expression. We need to find the slope first. We use the slope formula to find slope first. And then we use the same slope to represent the expression using point slope form. And technically, like I said, if you get this step, you're basically done. Okay, so everything here is just my preference. I prefer to have the slope. Let me write this down for you. I prefer to have this slope intercept form, because in this way, if I need to take different x values, it's easier for me to find the y value. Okay, so now we have the expression of the straight line. Let's go back to the question and see what the question is asking. So we have, so part A says determine the cost of a banquet for 150 people. 150 people. What is this question really asking? It's asking us, so we have the total cost, y is equal to 9x plus 350. What is x here? This is number of guests, number of people. What is y here? The y here is total cost, right? So the question A is really asking if x is equal to 150, what is y? If we translate the words into math language, that's what part A is really asking. So how to do that? We simply plot this number here, and then we find y. That's what we do. So when x is equal to 150, y will be equal to 9 times 150 plus 350. So y is equal to 9 times 150, that's 1350, right? Plus 350. So the answer will be 1700. How do we interpret this answer? This 1700 means if we have 150 guests, if we have 150 people that come to this banquet, then the total cost will be 1700. Okay, if we have 150 people come to the banquet, then the total cost will be $1,700. That's part A. Let's look at part B. How many people could attend how many people could attend if you paid $2,300 $2,330, 2330. How many people could attend if you paid this much money? If we translate this question to math language, what is this part really asking? Let me remind you again. Y is equal to 9x plus 350. Y here is total cost, which is how much money you pay eventually. X is the number of people. Okay. So how many people? This means we need to find X, right? How many people could attend if you paid $2,330? This means if Y is equal to 2330, what is X? That's the translation of this question to math language. How do we do that? We plug Y here and find X. Okay, so if you see, this question from the very beginning, and like after you do like several parts, you will notice that it's just, sometimes the question asks you to find X given Y. Sometimes the question asks you to find Y given X. But it's just, small manipulations, okay, small operations, okay? Like there's nothing like we can't understand. We have enough knowledge, we have enough tools to understand this. So now let's make Y be 2330. So 2330 is equal to 9x plus 350. We just need to find X, right? This shouldn't be a problem for us now, right? We just use the basic mathematical operation to find X. We move 350 to this side of the equation, minus 350, and 9x is left on the right side of the equation. So 2330 minus 350, that should be 1980, right? Yes. Like I said, my mental math is not that good, so let me double check my answer. So 2330 minus 350. Yeah, 1980, which is equal to 9x. Now we just need to find X. X is equal to 1980 over 9, which is equal to 220, right? Yeah, 220. So what does 220 mean in this context? This 220 means if we paid $22,330 upfront, then we can invite 220 people into the banquet. Okay, I repeat this. If we paid 2,330 people upfront, it doesn't matter if it's upfront or eventually, it doesn't really matter. But if we pay $2,330 for this banquet, then we can invite 220 people to the banquet. That's what it means. Okay. What quantity? Let's look at part C. That's part B, right? Part B is done. What quantity does the slope of the relation represent? What quantity does the slope of the relation represent? So let's come back to the graph. Okay, this might be a little bit hard to understand. The slope here actually represents how much one meal costs. Okay, so the slope here actually represents how much one meal costs. Okay. I just pause the video because I want to find a good way to explain this. Okay, I think I found a good way. So let's look at this point, 5,800. So if we invite 50 people, we need to pay $800, right? Now let's consider if we invite 51 people, how much money do we need to pay in total? So if X is equal to 51, what is Y? So we know Y is equal to 9 times 51 plus 350, right? So 9 times 51, that's right, 459 plus 350, which is equal to 809, right? Okay, so if we have 51 people, then we need to pay $809. If we have 50 people, we only need to pay $800. What does that mean? That means every time we have one more guest, we need to pay extra $9. Extra $9 for an extra guest. Right? Let me repeat this. So we have this point, right? We know if we have 50 people, then we need to pay $800 for the banquet. Now, if we have 51 people, then we can use the expression that we found to find that if we have 51 people, then we need to pay $809, which means for the extra guest, we need to pay $9 extra. We know that the room rent, is fixed, right? It doesn't matter how many people we invite, the room rent is always the same. So the extra $9 can only be the cost of one meal, right? The extra $9 can only be the cost of the extra meal for this extra guest. And we see the slope here is 9, right? The slope here is 9. So we can draw the conclusion that the extra $9, which is equal to the slope, represents the extra cost for one meal. Okay, so the answer for part C, what quantity does the slope of the relation represent? So the slope is equal to 9, right? And this represents the cost of one meal. Okay, so in the linear relation, okay, if we have a straight line in any linear relation, okay, the slope usually represents some kind of change rate, okay, or sometimes we call it rate of change. Okay, sometimes we call it rate of change. So the slope always represents the rate of change of something, the rate of change. Okay, and in this case, it represents the cost of one meal. Okay. Okay. Part D, determine the y-intercept of the relation. What meaning does the y-intercept have? Again, let's go back to the graph. Y-intercept, actually we found this already in here. right, in here, because we found the slope intercept form. And we can just read the slope and the y-intercept directly off this formula. And we can see that the y-intercept is equal to 350. So that's 300, y-intercept is equal to 350. What meaning does this have? Imagine, okay. So we have y is equal to 9x plus 350. Here, again, x represents the number of guests that we invite. Y is equal to, y represents the total cost, right? If we let x be 0, which means we rent the facilities for a banquet, but we don't invite any guests. So when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 350. What does this mean? This means we don't invite any people. We don't invite any any guests to the banquet. And yet we still need to pay $350. What cost could that be? We don't have any guests, but we need to pay $350. The answer should be obvious, right? This $350 must be the room rent, right? Because as the owner of the banquet facilities, I don't care how many people you invite, right? I'm letting you rent my facilities for your banquet. Regardless of the number of guests you invite, you can invite 10 people, you can invite 20 people, you can invite 300 people. Regardless, it doesn't really matter to me, but you need to pay me the rent, right? So this $350 here, 350 means the room rent. Okay, so the y-intercept here is equal to 350, and the meaning is room rent. Okay, so this is everything that we need to study in week 25 class. Hopefully this is helpful. Okay, I know the word problems might be a little bit hard for you, so please watch the video more than one time if it's necessary, and make sure that you understand it, because I did the homework and I know there is a question like this. Okay, so this is a very good practice. If you don't really understand the question, the best way to understand it is do the question again on your own. Okay, when you watch my video, you might think, okay, I understand it. But when you actually do it on your own, there will be new problems. Okay, so make sure that you really understand the questions. Okay, that's everything for week 25.